Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech and iOS 18.3.2 released earlier this week, along with iOS 18.4 Beta 3. But there's even more features and changes to talk about since the iOS 18.4 Beta 3 is out What's New video. We'll talk about some news as well as the overall experience. I've been using both versions on the iPhone 16 Pro and 16 Pro Max, and also iPadOS 18.4 Beta 3 as well. We'll also talk about your experience based off the YouTube community poll, where at the time of this video, there's over 11,000 votes and 194 comments. I've gone through all the comments to determine what the experience is like on both versions, so be sure to stick around toward the end of the video as we'll read some of your comments as well. Now, Apple is a mess, and this is quite concerning this week. John Gruber on his Daring Fireball website wrote a long post about how Apple is not the same and something is wrong, and goes as far as calling something rotten due to a lack of promised features. John Gruber is close with Apple executives, and to hear him say something like this is quite concerning. While I've been saying something is up with Apple for some time, to hear someone who interviews Apple executives every year at WWDC say this is completely new and something different. Apple has now removed the ads and many references to Siri's personal context features on their Apple Intelligence website. They've removed a bunch of ads off of YouTube, and they've even added a disclaimer down at the bottom of their website saying that many of the features will be available in the coming months. So there's definitely something going on, and Apple today internally also held a team meeting for those who are actually working on Siri to thank them for their hard work despite the disappointments many have been feeling. Apple's senior executive director, Robbie Walker, had said, "We have other commitments across Apple to other projects," Walker said, citing new software and hardware initiatives. "We want to keep our commitments to those, and we understand those are now potentially more timeline urgent than the features that have been deferred." He said decisions on timing will be made on a case-by-case basis as work progresses on products planned for next year. So again, this is a huge mess. Something's going on and very concerning. Some have said that Tim Cook should leave, other people should be fired, but at this point, I think just some better direction, clarity, and stability would be very welcome. Now, it also seems we have an issue with the iPhone 16e. And with the iPhone 16e, it seems to be having some Bluetooth issues for quite a few people, where audio will just cut out and stutter. This has been an issue for iOS in general for a bit, so I thought nothing of it when it happened to me when I was testing this for a week. But it seems like there's quite a few issues with it as far as Bluetooth goes, and I experienced it but just thought it was bad iOS software. But it seems it could be hardware related. So maybe we'll have an update to address that, but let me know if you have a 16e and are experiencing those same problems. Apple also announced some games coming to Apple Arcade that I'm actually pretty excited about. If we take a look here on their announcement, 6 games are coming to Apple Arcade in April, including Katamari Damacy, Space Invaders, and one of my all-time favorites is Roller Coaster Tycoon. So that's Roller Coaster Tycoon Classic Plus. That's coming to iPad, and you'll be able to play that in Apple Arcade. So lots of great things coming soon, so hopefully these are really great to play on an iPad, as I haven't really tried it out. As far as new features this week, well, there's a new feature we've had for a while that's now available on the web. Just like Apple made Apple Music available on the web, Apple Music Classical is now available on the web. So if you're using Classical, you can now access that on the website, and I'll link that in the description at classical.music.apple.com. Apple has also confirmed they're going to add end-to-end encryption to RCS messaging soon in a future update. This is great for those that wanted that feature and don't use iMessage that's already encrypted. Now when you send RCS, when it's set up, it'll be encrypted as long as the other end supports that. So it's great to see Apple bring that to the iPhone. iOS 18.3.2 seems to be enabling Apple Intelligence on many devices. Now, it seems this may be a default action going forward, as we've seen this on many devices with the past few updates. And under Apple Intelligence, if you had it disabled to begin with, they've now made it enabled once you reboot and it's installed. So if you do have it enabled and you don't want to use it, and maybe want to free up some storage, you can just turn it off. As far as other new features this week, well, Photos has a couple new features I want to mention. And within our Photos, if we go to our sorting options, then go to Filter, under Filter we have 2 new options, Shared with You and Not in an Album. Also, if we go out of this and then go into our albums, under Albums in the 3-dot menu in the upper right, we now have an option to sort by date modified. So a couple different options to help you find photos better. Within Accessibility in our Touch menu, we now have the option to show a banner when we're using back tap. So if I double tap on the back, you'll see it pops down, and we had a little glitch there, but let's try it again. it will give us a little message. So you can't really see it due to where we were, but let me try it again. You'll see there we have a little message that says back tap. We can turn that message off where that message was added before with this option to show banner. Back within settings, if we scroll to the bottom and go to apps, and then go to default apps, there's an option for translation. We've had this for a little while, but in the EU, we also have an option for navigation apps. So you can set those by default. If you didn't have that before, it's available in the EU along with your default app options. Now on iOS 18.3.2, the first time you open Notes, it looks like there's a new splash screen. And also, if you're on iOS 18.4 Beta 3 and you have the spring cases, some people have told me that the new animation is there. I didn't see it on 18.3.2, but if you place this on here with MagSafe, it should show the color of the case. Let me know if you have that. If you have one of the newest silicone cases for spring 2025, they're Apple official cases, and typically when you place them on the phone, they'll show the color. They don't show that with 18.3.2. Now, iOS 18.4 Beta 3 also introduces new shortcut actions for Apple's TV app. So if we go into shortcuts here, so just like many other apps, we have the option to change TV settings and many others if you search for TV. So it looks like Apple's really updated just about every app with some new settings. And on watchOS 11.4 Beta 3, if we go into the Alarms app, within an alarm, tap on it, scroll to the bottom, we have an option to break through silent mode. So you have that option where sound will always play while wearing Apple Watch. Let me know if you're seeing this or if this is something 100% new. I'm not able to verify this between multiple watches on the beta, but it does appear to be something that's new. Now, with the next iPhones, we keep hearing more and more news about the iPhone 17 Air, and at this time we have more information about the overall dimensions. Analyst Jeff Poo has said that the thickness of the main part of the 17 Air will be 5.5 millimeters, as we've been hearing, but the camera bump area will be almost double at 9.5 millimeters thick. That's still super thin overall, but it is slightly thicker in the camera bump area, so that's just something that's been noted. And also with the iPhone 17 Pro, it's also said to get advanced cooling this time around, according to a leaker in China called Instant Digital. We've heard Apple would have vapor chambers in the past to keep things cool for some time, but it looks like it's actually going to launch with the iPhone 17 Pro models. They could finally implement this to keep the heat down. There's also hints that the name could change to iPhone 17 Ultra again. We've heard this in the past, but it seems like it's more likely this year. But either way, we'll have to wait and see with that one. iOS 19 had some huge news this week. Mark Gurman, along with a couple others, has confirmed that it's going to get a redesign. Mark Gurman has not said this in the past before. Many people have said we hear this every year, but that's not typically from him. He's fairly right when it comes to iOS updates. Pretty spot on, except for maybe a few dates, and it should be a huge redesign with different icons, maybe different interactions, and I had a separate video going over everything to expect so far, but it looks like we could finally get a redesign, and hopefully that's why they've been faltering on the OS right now. If they're redesigning things, maybe the new version is much more stable. At least that's what I'm hoping for. As far as releases, well, of course, we had quite a few earlier this week with iOS 18.4 Beta 3, 18.3.1, Mac updates, and everything else. However, the next beta update seems like it's going to be as soon as Monday. Based on what we had this week and the previous week, I would expect it on the 17th or 18th. That should maybe be the final beta, or we could get a couple more, as iOS 18.4 is releasing in April, according to Apple. Based on what we know, typically they release on a Monday, so I would expect it maybe on April 7th. So we could see Beta 4 on the 17th, maybe Beta 5 on the 24th, with an iOS 18.4 RC on the 31st. Something along those lines, and then the public release on the 7th, with iOS 18.5 maybe releasing later that week with Beta 1. We know it's in the works. MacRumors has seen that in the analytics as well on their website, so it looks like that's coming very soon as well. Now, when it comes to the overall experience, first let's talk about iOS 18.3.2. With iOS 18.3.2, it's mostly stable, but there's definitely some issues. Some things have been fixed. Applying color to text markup on photos sometimes wouldn't work properly, and it's now working properly again. However, there's quite a few odd issues this time around, such as apps crashing. Many people have reported just apps completely crashing. The touch issue is still there for some. However, initially I didn't see it at all. It looks like it's returned for some. And then we have stutters and micro stutters in this update. So just scrolling sometimes is really choppy. Just doing basic tasks sometimes slows everything down. There's also Wi-Fi dropping again for some people, and the alarm bug is returned for some, where it just won't alarm and people are missing their alarm clock. So that's pretty unfortunate that there's still some issues. However, it's mostly stable for most people. When it comes to iOS 18.4 Beta 3, well, this can be a little bit of a mess too, but I would say it's more stable than 18.3.2. There are some stutters here and there. I didn't see any micro stutters myself, just going through. I've actually had a pretty good experience with the exception of a couple things. Lock screen widgets are centered again, so if we go ahead and maybe add one here, we'll add a widget. Maybe we'll just add a couple like this, and they seem to be centered where they should be. So that's great news. Overall, it seems to be better that way. However, the wallpaper dimming bug is still there. You can see it here. We'll swipe home, and sometimes it desaturates a little bit. In prior updates, it would oversaturate. Also, another issue I was having was going into the camera. I was recording a video earlier this week for a different video you'll see later on, and the phone just completely went blank, crashed, and rebooted while I was in the middle of recording a video. That's something you definitely don't want. Some have had issues with notification scrolling. I showed that in the initial What's New video, and others are just saying that Find My is not showing locations properly or taking a long time to update. Also, something that I think is more app related is YouTube is starting in 144 as far as the resolution. I had someone comment and say, why isn't your video in high quality? And it actually was. They needed to adjust their quality on the YouTube app because it was starting in low quality. So that may be an app issue. They need to adjust for that. But overall, I've actually had a good experience other than that one reboot issue. And again, one other thing is some people are saying mail notifications are not coming through. I'm not really seeing that myself, but some are saying that. Also, when using Google Maps with Apple CarPlay and listening to a podcast, I noticed some odd volume changes. So it wasn't crashing, it was still working. But if I had directions, maybe go over the speakers from Google Maps, then it would go back to the podcast. And sometimes the podcast would be barely audible. I'd have to turn the volume up. And then other times it would be super loud. So why there's that volume adjustment there, I'm not sure. But overall, iOS is a concerning mess at this point. Many people are being discouraged, and I really hope iOS 19 fixes this and Apple finally gets things on a good path with stability and everything else. Many people are saying we need a snow leopard year where everything is just all about stability. And I think I agree with them, but I would like to see a redesign as this feels stale, boring, and inconsistent. When it comes to overall performance, iOS 18.3.2 is okay. It's not phenomenal, but it's okay. And you'll see there was that touch bug there when I picked it up. It didn't do anything for a second. But going into things like ProMotion seemed to be smoother on iOS 18.4 Beta 3. The overall experience seems much smoother on the new beta, which is odd since we have a public release already. But this does have some security updates, so I did recommend people upgrade to it for that. But overall, there are some performance issues with 18.3.2 for some people. But again, 18.4 Beta 3 is nice and smooth. The overall heat of the device is actually pretty good for me on the beta. Some people have complained that it gets overly warm, but I haven't seen that myself. But let's take a quick look with the thermal camera. And on iOS 18.4 Beta 3 on the 16 Pro Max, we're at about 32 degrees Celsius. It went up to 32.5. On 18.3.2 on the 16 Pro, we're at 29 degrees Celsius, so much cooler there. But overall, it's running fairly cool for me on both devices, and I really don't have a complaint there, but I know some people were saying during certain games it was just getting blazing hot. So let me know if you're having that issue in the comments below. When it comes to battery life, well, let's go ahead and take a look at 18.3.2 first. And thanks to Cameron for sending this in. This is on an iPhone 16 Pro Max with 100% battery health. And you'll see after a full day of use, 7 hours and 6 minutes of screen active time, 6 hours and 48 minutes of screen idle time, with about 25% or so left. So overall, that's actually pretty good. I've seen some complaints from many of you that it has been a lot worse than 18.3.1. So hopefully it will improve over the next few days. Sometimes it can take up to a week to stop processing in the background. As far as iOS 18.4 Beta 3, let's take a look at my battery. You'll see battery health. I have 100% with 145 cycles, and you'll see it's still updating in the background. So it still has a ways to finish here, so it could be even better over the next few days. But you'll see I only had 2 hours and 40 minutes of screen active time today, 5 hours and 39 minutes of screen idle time. The day before, almost 80% of my battery was used, and I only had 3 hours and 34 minutes. So it's not great. I'd say it's better than Beta 2 and Beta 1, but for me, it still needs some improvement. But again, it's processing in the background here. As far as benchmarks, let's go ahead and take a look at that. Now from left to right, we have iPadOS 18.4 Beta 3 on the M4 iPad Pro 13-inch, the iPhone 16 Pro running iOS 18.3.2, and then the iPhone 11 and iPhone 16 Pro Max are running iOS 18.4 Beta 3. All of them have pretty great Geekbench scores, specifically the iPhone 16 Pro running iOS 18.3.2. So overall, some of the highest multi-core scores I've ever seen. In general, they're all running well based on benchmarks. Now, when it comes to the overall experience, let's take a look at what you had to say. The 8 Travel Girl said, after this last update, everything is running smoothly and I haven't encountered any bugs. Chris Palmer 4983 said, I've been using iOS 18.3.2 on my iPhone 16 Pro. Battery life has been good, but not great. Perhaps after the apps are tweaked, battery life will improve. The standby battery drain has been good. I usually get an all-day battery life with moderate use. However, it is quite a different story with heavy use. Andreas Adamidis 6963 said, 18.3.2 broke the App Store on my 15 Pro Max. Apps take forever to download as if I'm on dial-up, while the rest of the browsing is fine, and I'm on gigabit internet. This is getting worse and worse. Video Game Pro 1997 F1Z said, I'm on iOS 18.3.2 on my iPhone 13 Pro. No problems whatsoever. Dentist KK said, the alarm bug, micro stutters, keyboard lag, call drops, and less screen on time are all back at once on my iPhone 16 Pro with the latest 18.3.2 update. Very disappointing. Hopefully 18.4 fixes all those issues. Willie Seth 740 said, 18.4 beta on 15 Pro Max. It works quite well. Battery life is decent for a beta, but it could be better. No stutters or UI problems. Apps are opening quite quickly and everything is good. AC9DJ said, I'm on 18.4 Beta 3 on a 16 Pro Max. Battery life is good, no connectivity issues, and no touch problems. On rare occasion, I did get a glitch while scrolling. Now, when it comes to storage, let's take a look at that. We'll go into General and then Storage or iPhone Storage, wait for it to load, and we'll scroll to the bottom. And you can see iOS 18.4 Beta 3 is using a lot more storage. So you'll see Apple Intelligence is using 7.1 gigabytes on the beta, where it's only using 5.75 gigabytes on 18.3.2. So there's definitely a little bit more storage being taken up. Of course, as I've mentioned before, system data goes up and down as needed. So that's everything with iOS 18.3.2 and iOS 18.4 Beta 3. I'm looking forward to iOS 19 and all the changes that could have, but hopefully it brings stability. I think most of us at this point really want that, but let me know what you want most from the next version of iOS. We should be getting WWDC25 Invites soon, where we'll have WWDC typically in June. I would expect it on June 2nd or June 9th, and then we'll see all of the latest betas with a public release typically in September. So I'm looking most forward to that, but again, let me know what you're looking most forward to in the comments below. Of course, if you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, I'll link it in the description like I normally do, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.